Geologic hazards caused by volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and landslides. First, let's talk about volcanic eruptions. Before that, let's first watch this short video. Ashes were already falling. A dense black cloud was coming up behind us.
In February of 1942, Mexican farmer Dionisio Pulido thought he heard thunder coming from his cornfield. However, the sound wasn't coming from the sky. The source was a large smoking crack emitting gas and ejecting rocks. This fissure would come to be known as the volcano Paracutin, and over the next 9 years, its lava and ash would cover over 200 square kilometers. But where did this new volcano come from, and what triggered its unpredictable eruption? The story of any volcano begins with magma. Often, this molten rock forms in areas where ocean water is able to slip into the Earth's mantle and lower the layer's melting point. The resulting magma typically remains under the Earth's surface thanks to the delicate balance of 3 geological factors. The first is lithostatic pressure. This is the weight of the Earth's crust pushing down on the magma below. Magma pushes back with the second factor, magmastatic pressure. The battle between these forces strains the third factor, the rock strength of the Earth's crust. Usually, the rock is strong enough and heavy enough to keep the magma in place. But when this equilibrium is thrown off, the consequences can be explosive. One of the most common causes of an eruption is an increase in magmastatic pressure. Magma contains various elements and compounds, many of which are dissolved in the molten rock. At high enough concentrations, compounds like water or sulfur no longer dissolve and instead form high-pressure gas bubbles. When these bubbles reach the surface, they can burst with the force of a gunshot. And when millions of bubbles explode simultaneously, the energy can send plumes of ash into the stratosphere. But before they pop, they act like bubbles of CO2 in a shaken soda. Their presence lowers the magma's density and increases the buoyant force pushing upward through the crust. Many geologists believe this process was behind the Paracutin eruption in Mexico. There are 2 known natural causes for these buoyant bubbles. Sometimes, new magma from deeper underground brings additional gassy compounds into the mix. But bubbles can also form when magma begins to cool. In its molten state, magma is a mixture of dissolved gases and melted minerals. As the molten rock hardens, some of those minerals solidify into crystals. This process doesn't incorporate many of the dissolved gases, resulting in a higher concentration of the compounds that form explosive bubbles. Not all eruptions are due to rising magmastatic pressure. Sometimes the weight of the rock above can become dangerously low. Landslides can remove massive quantities of rock from atop a magma chamber, dropping the lithostatic pressure and instantly triggering an eruption. This process is known as unloading, and it's been responsible for numerous eruptions, including the sudden explosion of Mount St. Helens in 1980. But unloading can also happen over longer periods of time due to erosion or melting glaciers. In fact, many geologists are worried that glacial melt caused by climate change could increase volcanic activity. Finally, eruptions can occur when the rock layer is no longer strong enough to hold back the magma below. Acidic gases and heat escaping from magma can corrode rock through a process called hydrothermal alteration, gradually turning hard stone into soft clay. The rock layer could also be weakened by tectonic activity. Earthquakes can create fissures, allowing magma to escape to the surface, and the Earth's crust can be stretched thin as continental plates shift away from each other. Unfortunately, knowing what causes eruptions doesn't make them easy to predict. While scientists can roughly determine the strength and weight of the Earth's crust, The depth and heat of magma chambers makes measuring changes in magmastatic pressure very difficult. But volcanologists are constantly exploring new technology to conquer this rocky terrain. Advances in thermal imaging have allowed scientists to detect subterranean hotspots. Spectrometers can analyze gases escaping magma, and lasers can precisely track the impact of rising magma on a volcano's shape. Hopefully, these tools will help us better understand these volatile vents and their explosive eruptions. Did you know that there's an even more explosive and destructive kind of volcano known as a supervolcano? 650,000 years ago, when the Yellowstone supervolcano last exploded, it covered North America in nearly 2 meters of ash and rock. Find out more about these epic eruptions with this video.
Well done this video. Now, what can you infer or conclude the video? I have 3 questions. First, in your own words, what is volcanic eruptions? Second, how volcanic eruptions affects to the human being, to our environment, to the vehicle, and to the houses. Third, there is a positive effect of volcanic eruptions. Number 1. Volcanic eruptions can cause a lot of damage to both nearby areas and areas miles away from the eruption site. There are many different effects after an eruption that create a health hazard for both human and wildlife alike. When a volcano erupts, it is very powerful and the effects of it can be felt on other continents. Volcanoes eruptions have even destroyed entire cities throughout history. Most Pompeii was buried by volcanic ash in 79 AD. There are many negative effects of volcanoes erupting. The extreme force of volcanic erupting can sometimes actually cause an earthquake. An earthquake happens because of tectonic plates rubbing against each other and fault lines. Most volcanoes are located on fault lines, which is why they can sometimes cause earthquakes. This is also why earthquakes can also cause volcanoes to erupt. The earthquakes caused by volcanoes are usually not felt by people but can register on a Richter scale. The magma of the volcano is what causes the earthquake. When the magma gets into the cracks in the plate and causes pressure to build up, in 1991, the Mount Pinatubo eruption in the Philippines was caused by many small earthquakes from magma in the volcano entering the cracks in the tectonic plates that caused the pressure to build up until the volcano erupted and thousands of tons of gas were released into the atmosphere. Volcanic eruption can also have negative effects on the weather and climate of an area and region. When a volcano erupts, a lot of gases are released that can go all the way into the atmosphere and can cause a cooling effect to occur. The other effect of eruptions can warm the atmosphere because of the greenhouse gases they also emit. According to the British Geological Survey, 100 to 300 million tons of CO2 are released each year by both underwater and land volcanoes. Although this is a smaller amount than what humans create, it is still a large amount that is being released every year. Large eruptions, such as Pinatubo eruption, can cause temperatures around the world to drop for the following years. Another effect of volcanic eruption is plants and wildlife dying. In that area, the lava that is sent flying for miles of an explosive eruptions can cause wildfires that can devastate a wildlife area. When explosive eruption occurs, it also sends a lot of ash that can wreak havoc of the wildlife ability to breathe and by contaminating water sources when Mount Santo Helens erupted in 1980s. It is estimated that 24,115 animals died due to the ash. The ash is also hard on insects because ash can damage the wings of insects, plant life, and can damage for years depending on the amount of rain they receive after an eruption. In Hawaii, in only 2 years, some plant life has started growing back from a volcano that had lava flows because of the heavy rainfall that occurs there. In another part of Hawaii, where there is little rainfall, the plant life has still not recovered from the lava flows that occurred 200 years ago. Number 2. Volcanic eruptions effects to the human being by the health concerns after volcanic eruption include infections, disease, respiratory illness, burns, injuries from falls and vehicle accidents related to the slippery, hazy condition caused by ash. When warnings are needed, the chances of adverse health effects from a volcanic eruptions are very low. Causes and effects of volcanic eruptions. Although there are several factors triggering a volcanic eruption, three predominant: the buoyancy of the magma, the pressure from the exhaust gases in the magma, and the injection of new batch of magma into an already filled magma chamber. How volcanic eruptions affects to the human being. First, carbon dioxide and fluorine gases that can be toxic to the humans can collect in volcanic ash if he inhaled. Volcanic ash can cause breathing problems and damage the lungs. Inhaling large amounts of ash and volcanic gases can cause a person to suffocate. Suffocation is the most common cause of death from a volcano. How volcanic eruptions affects to the environment. The gases and the dust particles thrown into the atmosphere during volcanic eruptions have influence on climate. Volcanoes have also caused global warming over millions of years during times in Earth history that when extreme amount of volcanism occurred, releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. How volcanic eruptions affect to the vehicles. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, volcanic ash can infiltrate nearly every opening and scratch most surface, especially between moving parts of vehicles. Ash particles can clog air filtration system, which can then lead to overheating and engine failure.
That is all my presentation of volcanic eruptions. Thanks for watching.